Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's event, an OTel Carol, past, present, and future of OpenTelemetry. I'm Colin Contrary. I'm the head of content at Embrace. I will be today's moderator. We've got a wonderful panel of OTel experts who are all ready to take us on a journey through the past year in OpenTelemetry. That's right, audience. You are all essentially Ebenezer Scrooge, and you're going to be visited by the ghosts of OTel past, present, and future to learn about what's truly important this holiday season and in life. Better observability! First, we'll see the ghost of OTel past and learn about the best new projects, libraries, and tools that launched in 2025 and how they're solving some previous challenges with OpenTelemetry. Then we will visit the ghost of OTel present to learn what existing OTel projects, libraries, and tools had the best improvements in this past year. And finally, we will shudder in excitement at the ghost of OTel future and learn about upcoming proposals and standards and improvements to look out for in 2026. So, a lot of great stuff we're going to cover. And if you have any questions about OpenTelemetry or about any of the topics that we are going to cover, please, we would love to answer them. So ask your questions using the Q&A section, and we will answer them either during that section or at dedicated Q&A time at the end. And with all of that out of the way, let's dive in. Let's start with a fun poll question as we start to meet our panelists. So as I launch the poll, Dan, why don't we start with you giving an intro and maybe sharing a fun holiday item you have?
Cool.
Oh wait,
Yeah,
I gotta go first. Dan, what am I doing? Did I
yeah,
introduce
you go
myself?
first. Yeah.
I Let me introduce. I said I'm Colin Contrary, but I
Whoops.
didn't do my item. I'm sorry, Dan. I'm
Yeah.
pooching you. Look, I just want to share this. It's a macaroni and cheese ornament. My daughters absolutely love it. You cannot see it, but it's starting to peel away from the felt because they rip it off the tree. They love it so much. So my holiday item is this mac and cheese ornament.
Nice.
Sorry, Dan, I jumped your intro, but now you can go, Dan.
That's cool. Yeah, I'm Dan. I'm a principal observability architect at New Relic, and with Adriana, I'm a maintainer of the end user special interest group, the end user SIG. And let me tell you about my favorite bauble, which is very cool like that. But the cool thing it's got is that it's got chocolates inside. You can open it. Yeah, how cool is that? There
Now,
you
do
go.
you refill it with chocolates every year, Dan, or is this the first year you've
It's
had it?
it's every day, you know.
Love
All
that.
right. Maybe
Yeah.
we'll see you eat one during the panel. We'll find out. Thank you so much, Dan. Adriana, can you go next?
Yeah, my name is Adriana Vilela. I am a principal developer advocate at Dynatrace, and as Dan said, we work together on the OTel end user SIG alongside Reese Lee. And my super awesome holiday item is, oops, my elf on a shelf, looking mischievous as ever, and she has a special little custom-made crochet skirt made by a friend of mine.
Oh, very fun. Awesome. How about next we go to Uric?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, my name is Jurasi. I'm a software engineer. I'm a co-founder at Holy Garden as well. And I'm part of the governance committee for OpenTelemetry. So, and since the beginning of the year, I've been fighting the good fight of bad telemetry. So I'm fighting bad telemetry. And my favorite holiday item is this one. So this is I don't know, mold. What is the name in English of that? A mold wine mug that I got like 15 years or so ago, perhaps a little bit more, in Vienna, Austria. And this is the very first mug that I got that started our collection of travel mugs. So yeah.
Nice.
Nice. Awesome. All right. And rounding us out is Hanson.
Hi, my name is Hanson. I do mobile observability stuff here at Embrace, and my holiday item is this. Oh, let's see. It is a polar bear hot chocolate bomb.
Ooh.
You pour hot milk on it, you mix it up, and it's got all sorts of goodies in it. So I can't wait to try that on a holiday day.
All right. You put that into a large cup and then it melts?
A larger cup, and you pour hot milk in it, and you mix it
Oh,
up, and then you have a hot chocolate where you had a bear. So
Poor polar
nice.
bear.
All right. All right.
they're sacrifices for the betterment of my stomach. So,
All right. Awesome. All right. Well, thank y'all. It's happy to have all y'all here. Why don't we end the poll? Let's see what the people have said. Let's see. Oh,
Ooh,
interesting. Oh,
wow.
Jim Carrey, A Christmas Carol is
I
tied
didn't
with
even
the.
know there was a Jim Carrey Christmas Carol
You know what's
movie.
funny, Adriana?
What?
I did not know that either. I went and Googled. I'm like, what are the different Christmas Carol versions? Wait, this one happened? Turns out not only it happened, but people love it.
Wow.
Also, audience, just know that obviously I had to whittle this list down because there are approximately 15,000 versions of A Christmas Carol. So if yours is not here, I apologize. But because only one of you said other, I don't feel that bad. All right. So with all of that out of the way, let's get started with our discussion. So first, we are going to be visited by the ghost of OTel past. And so what we're going to talk about is what are some of the best new things that were launched within the past year. So they've already launched this year, so it's in the recent past. But let's talk about what was launched this year that was very interesting and fun, and very helpful for getting better observability. And I want to kick it off with Dan because I know you are itching to talk about declarative config. Can we start there?
Yes, and this is like I guess very, very recent past. As in, there was a blog post released, I think, a couple of days ago, maybe last week, about the third release candidate for declarative config, and and it basically solves a real problem for. And I would say I would put my platform engineer hat on, and it solves a real problem to provide a standard, way of like configuring the OpenTelemetry SDK across all languages. So if you're thinking about, declarative config as, a config file that you can, pass to your SDK, and and allows you to configure all things. Now, why do we need it in OTel? I think that's the main question. Well, the first thing is, like, if anyone's worked with OTel SDKs, it's super flexible. There's loads of config properties, right? Lots of things that you can tune, and yeah, it's good to have that schema, that that standard basically to define all these things, and that flexibility and that richness in the config as well means that there are certain things that are difficult to do with environment variables, right? Which is the other, like, one of the other ways of doing OTel config, or even system properties. So this allows you to do complex things. For example, if you want to define metric views, which, by the way, I don't know if the audience is not familiar with metric views in OpenTelemetry, I would urge you to go and look at it, because metric views are awesome. But for example, defining metric views is something that requires a little bit of a complex attributes, and the idea here is, like, you can do that in YAML, right? I think again, platform engineer hat on. There was this thing, like, a group that I was friends with, YAML camels. I mean, everyone here is like a YAML camel in platform engineers, so YAML is great. But yeah, so the most important thing, and this is why I started with, is if you're a platform engineer and you want to provide that contract between where the platform ends and where your developers are using OpenTelemetry, it's almost like, this becomes your contract, right? You've got the API layer and you've got the SDK layer in OTel. They're decoupled, and that's a great contract between a platform team that's able to provide a consolidated sort of like standard layer of config, then allows as well individual engineering teams that pick up the standard config, and they can apply config on top. So you can merge config, you can extend it, but then ultimately, engineering teams can just get about the API, and you can provide a config that works out of the box, that basically makes it a lot easier to do these things, basically, to get up and running. So
Nice. And just
really
for the audience that's unfamiliar with both of these configuration options, is the idea that we will see way less usage of environmental variables to configure OpenTelemetry? Like, is it still required in some use cases, or is the idea that this is essentially like a one-to-one replacement for most use cases?
So I would say probably that, at the moment, the implementation is mostly, is implemented in Java, PHP, C++. Other languages are coming along. So at the moment, basically, environment variables are the way to go in other languages. But, I would say that that will be ultimately the recommended pattern, or at least the one that I will recommend to configure OTel, right?
If I may add one point there as well, is that I'm using that on my own code. So on my Go, so you mentioned C++, Java, and so on, but also in Go, it is already ready to use. And when I compare the code that I've been doing this year with with the config packages, with the code that I had a couple of years ago, like that's a huge difference, and so much easier today to configure the SDK. And I think one of the points that Dan got very close to mentioning is there is a separation between runtime and development mode. Like when I'm developing the application, I can think about using the SDKs and the APIs. But then when I run my application, then I can specify what is the actual YAML or what is the actual configuration for my SDK that I want for that specific environment. So on my local machine, I have a specific config, a YAML that points to a local host 4318 that is running perhaps on a Docker container somewhere locally. But then when I deploy my application in production, that is using a YAML that sends data to two different places, my observability backend and my own backend, right, to evaluate the quality of my data. So, and that's a decision that we made at runtime, not at development time. I think that's for me one of the key benefits of using an external config file.
Yeah, yeah. There's one as well that comes with this as well. Another benefit is the standardization of certain things that are applicable across instrumentation libraries. So there are blocks in there, for example, if there's an option to, if you want to, in an instrumentation library for HTTP clients, if you want to record the headers, for example, which is something that's not done by default, right? Because that would be there could be sensitive information in there. So that type of standard config across instrumentation libraries is something that maybe you just want to define once and then have all the instrumentation libraries pick up from the same block of config instead of having to configure each instrumentation library perhaps in a different way. So that's another extra benefit. That's why there's so many benefits.
We had to limit you to just covering a few of them, Dan.
Yeah.
Okay, that's awesome. Why don't we move on to another great thing that launched this year? Now, it's not actually an OpenTelemetry project, but obviously the entire OTel community loves it. I'm going to hand it over to you, Yurisi. Tell us all about Instrumentation Score.
Yeah, so the Instrumentation Score is a project that we launched in June this year, if I remember correctly. We made it open source. We made it an open specification out of the work that we're doing since the beginning of the year. And when I pinged Dan about this idea about, how about we make this an open spec kind of project? The first question we got was, why don't we do that as part of OpenTelemetry? And I think the main reason why Instrumentation Score is not part of OTel right now is we want to be free to have opinions and strong opinions in some cases. And those opinions, and we know that when we have like 10 engineers, you end up having like 11 opinions. So that's why we decided to start small and then see which of those opinions are shared across everybody, and then solidify those opinions, and then perhaps move into the OTel side of the, like donate to OTel or join OTel. It's not set. It's not we don't have a timeline for that, or even we don't know if that's going to happen in the future. But we know that we want to stay very close to OpenTelemetry. Perhaps I should mention what is the Instrumentation Score.
Yeah, I was going to say, let's start the audience is probably like, this is great. He's saying stuff nicely, but what is it?
Yeah, sorry. So the Instrumentation Score is a project where experts in the industry document what are the good things and bad things about telemetry. Like what is a good telemetry, what is bad telemetry. So what are the things that you should be following, and what are the things that you should not be doing in any case, right? So for instance, a span name should not be a high cardinality name, so that you should be able to group them, and you should be able to see them on a drop-down box somewhere, and perhaps aggregate those and create metrics out of those specific types of spans. Or perhaps your telemetry should have a service.name resource attribute. Or perhaps your logs in production should not be like debug mode for more than 14 days. Right? So those are things that we know as an industry, we know as practitioners, but we never encoded that anywhere. Right? So that stayed as a oh, I know this hint here, so this is what I implemented at my company. And then somebody said the same for a different type of telemetry. And this is us coming together and saying, those are the things that we've seen in the past. Those are the things that we've implemented in some way. And those are our opinions. And this is why it's this set of opinions. And while OTel helps people defining what is a telemetry and how to collect and transmit and create that telemetry, the instrumentation score provides an opinion layer on top of that. It does not specify how to implement those ideas. It is really like you decide how to implement using your backend. But here are some of the starting points that you should be using to implement your ideas. Not all of that are useful for all of the backends, but yeah. And I'm gonna make a pause here because I'm so into this topic that I could talk for hours. But
Well, I know, Adriana, you're also very excited about this project. I'd love to hear from you on it as well.
Yeah, I'm excited because, I think Jurasi touched upon something that, it's one of those things where you're like, oh, let's do an instrumentation score. Oh, that makes so much sense, right? Because instrumentation is code and you can have bad instrumentation. So to have basically checks and balances in place to say, hey, this is what good instrumentation looks like, this is what bad instrumentation looks like is awesome. I did want to give a shout out to our fallen colleagues, Trace Test, who were starting to develop also some stuff around the quality of instrumentation in their product before they folded. And I think it's really cool to see, someone pioneer that, and then like Ollie Garden taking up the mantle, and then like the creation of Instrumentation Score. To be able to see that continue on in some form, I think is really exciting, and I'm super excited to see where it goes. I did want to mention one thing that I think can be kind of exciting is maybe some integration with OpenTelemetry Weaver, because Weaver allows you to not only define schemas, but also validate schemas. So I think it would be really cool to see how Instrumentation Score and OpenTelemetry Weaver can at some point play together in the future.
Yeah.
Nice.
And I think that's one of
Mhm.
the things that we want to establish. I think there is an issue open to like people to contribute if they want to contribute to see where the scope is between, instrumentation score and Weaver, right? So I think one of the aspects of instrumentation score that we try to encode in it is the concept of different levels of criticality, which, like in terms of semantic conventions, is like either you follow semantic conventions or you don't, right? But there are some other sort of like there's an aspect of instrumentation score that is related to, yeah, some things are more important than others, right? And then try to codify that in the score as well. I think it's quite important.
yeah, and I
Nice.
think one final aspect of that is because the instrumentation score does not preclude any implementation. It doesn't say how things should be implemented. It is not bound by the technical limitations of any tools, right? So instrumentation score is a set of opinions, and Weaver provides tools where people can implement some of those opinions. Most of them, really. But some of them might be relatively complex to do with Weaver, like the ones where we say that that relate to a trace as a whole, not individual spans. And there is no easy way, at least for now, to specify a rule about a specific trace, like a complete trace in Weaver that spans multiple services, right? So Weaver has a view of services. Of course, live check could perhaps in the future be changed if we have a full view of the trace. But um, instrumentation score being its own project allows instrumentation score to have opinions again that are not bound by technical implementations.
Yeah,
Okay.
the thing that excites me is experts can codify those opinions in something, and not just here's a best practices doc that's got 20 sections and 25 subsections. How are you going to validate it? Well, just follow every bullet point. You can't really do that, and to allow us to actually express opinion in a way that could be turned into code and then churn out a score at the end allows different domains to basically experts give an opinion on how you're doing. And this will help, I think, folks trying to start in observability and instrumentation tremendously. Because right now, OTel gives you like the basic letters. Convention gives you the vocabulary to talk the same. The instrumentation score gives you the syntax and evaluation if you're putting those things in the correct order. And it's a natural progression, the maturity of the platform. And I think it's essential for folks eventually to be like, in a couple of years, we'll be like, I can't believe we just let people do this without telling them if they're doing things right. So yeah, this is going to be fantastic.
Yeah, I think it's great because it saves developers from themselves.
Yeah. Also, I think that this panel here probably, like will agree on something that is, if you can't measure it, you can't improve it, right? So, and that includes instrumentation quality as well. So yeah, definitely.
Nice. Let's get into our last topic of OTel Past, because I definitely want to touch on this. So we talked about Instrumentation Score being not an OpenTelemetry project, but obviously so many people know OTel are so excited about it. But there has been a sea of community growth, specifically in donating and starting new projects and working groups this year. So I'd love to talk about some of this that happened this past year. I wonder if we start maybe with Dan. Can we talk a little bit about some changes in the donation process that have kind of led to the formation of some new working groups and some new donations this year?
Yeah. So I think one of the things that I'm particularly excited about, this is not like, more like happy to see is not the number of donations, which is great, but also how those happened, right? Which instead of like having hey, here's a bunch of code, that was yours. No, it has been more of a community building type of donations. We had donations where someone came in, like the one that comes to mind is the donation of like Go compile time instrumentation, where Alibaba, Datadog, and Quizma, they all got together as part of the same thing. So we almost had like two donations happening at the same time, and then they agreed on, as a community to say, hey, let's form a new SIG, a new special interest group. Let's put our heads together and like, come up with the best of each. And, that's to me, that's like the spirit of open source, to basically get people to collaborate. Yeah. So more the process and more the, what's happening in terms of like all the different collaborations within donations and building a community rather than the donations themselves that of course are great.
Yeah, but also growing just the interest of OpenTelemetry growing into more and more domains, more and more interest bubbling up across the space. I mean, Hanson, I know you are itching to talk about one of the donations that is currently in the mix of the Kotlin API. You want to touch a little bit about on that?
Yeah, so Kotlin is Android's preferred language. It's also a language that is used to develop a bunch of other things, not just Android. And there's not an API or an SDK that powers Kotlin OTel right now. Embrace and the philosophy other folks are trying to donate an API and SDK of implementation of OTel. And we're going through this process, as Dan mentioned, about trying to not just create some code and chuck it over the fence and say, here you go, there's code, here's a repost, a donation. It almost is a forcing function to create a community around, because really the code as it is right now is just the beginning. The forming of the community is what's important. And I think going through the process about, hey, how do you find people to do this? What is the existing things, existing people, existing SIGs that you could actually leverage? Is it big enough to create a SIG? Things like that. And going through this process, and seeing the new and improved process of how you start this up. It was really streamlined, and it asks the right questions. I mean, it asks questions that we should have the answer to, and if we don't, then what are we doing? And it has preliminarily been accepted pending some additional kind of work, but it should happen in the new year, maybe at the end of this year. See, it's running out of time, but um, uh, it's just the beginning. The donation is the beginning. It is not the end. There's a lot more work happening afterwards, and I think this is when you donate something, you're not just giving code, you're giving time, you're giving commitment, and you're doing recruitment as well. So I think anybody going in and say, hey, I have this cool project I want to donate. Well, are you willing to maintain or find a community to maintain it? Like that's the first question that's going to be asked. If the answer is no, it's like especially in age AI, where code is cheap and easily generated. If you don't have, some filtering to add to and change and improve and take feedback, it could be a bit of a challenge, shall we say.
Nice. And I don't know if are we early or is that a record for lateness? 25 minutes into an observability chat before AI was mentioned. But it happened. We knew it would happen eventually. All right, let's move. Unless Yurisi, did you want to touch very briefly on injector? Or no, Bela. I know you wanted to talk about that, right?
No, I wanted to touch on governance in general and use Bela as one example, perhaps the Go compile time instrumentation as another example. So those were two donations that happened this year that I think they were very interesting, and they set the tone for future donations as well, especially the compile time, the Go compile time instrumentation. So we had two donation proposals coming at around the same time from different companies, basically wanting to donate something very similar. And one thing that we achieved as a community is to join them, like get those two parties to talk to each other and form a new SIG based on the code that would be the target of that donation. So it's a net new project within OTel, but at the same time, it came with a community and a diverse community with people that are experts in that code, in that kind of code, from two different angles. And they are collaborating and nice things are happening. The same with Bela. So Bela also came with a community. That community nowadays, so OB, OpenTelemetry BPF instrumentation or eBPF instrumentation, that community is growing as well. And I think this is what we, in the governance side of the project, we aim to see for the future. We want projects, of course we do, but we want we want projects that are sustainable. We want projects that are set for success. Right, and and we cannot have a big success if we have a one company SIG. That's not how OpenTelemetry succeeds.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much, Yurisi. And now let's move on. We've covered the Ghost of OTel Past, so all the brand new things that happened in the past year. But now let's move on. Let's visit the Ghost of OTel Present. So for existing projects and tools and things in the OTel ecosystem, what are some of the biggest improvements to them? And we touched a little bit on this with Instrumentation Score and the OTel community wanting better ways to ensure quality and understand how to better instrument their applications. I want to start with Adriana in terms of improvements on the OpenTelemetry community in terms of interest, sending feedback, kind of just that community growth. Can you touch a little bit on how that's been improved in the past year?
Yeah, for sure. So I guess it all started way back when Jurasi approached us in the end user SIG about doing a survey helping us us helping the OTel collector SIG conduct a survey to help to drive the direction of the collector, like what kinds of features were important to folks. And that was kind of the start of us collaborating with other SIGs to run surveys on their behalf. Because, one of the struggles that we had with the end user SIG, and one of our mandates was to share feedback from users to the maintainers, but we didn't have a good process for it. We're kind of at a loss, and the survey was kind of the perfect solution to our problems. And with that initial collaboration, we then collaborated with other SIGs to help them run surveys, and our SIG repository is basically the source of truth, if you will, for the OTel surveys, where we keep the surveys and the results so that anyone who's interested can see the raw data. Now, that was part one, and in the last little while, as Dan said, we've had some new members join the OTel and user SIG, and in particular, we've had Andre join. He's from Grafana. And he took it upon himself to, look into streamlining the survey process to really organize things. And then Andre and I started talking, and he wanted to bring on an LFX mentee to help our project in some way. And we talked about bringing that mentee on to basically design a streamlined process, not only for conducting surveys, but also analyzing the results, because we are not statisticians, we are not data analysts, and we needed a way to make sure that the results were significant. So I'm super excited about the work that's being done, and our mentee Ernest has done a wonderful, wonderful job. So huge shout out to him. And I think he's just about wrapping up his internship, and he's done some great stuff. And I think by the time he's done his internship, we'll be in a great position to have like a proper framework for our OTel surveys, which is super cool.
It's awesome. It's like there's a lot more to it than you think, because if you've got like a list of questions and just some answers, then you might not get insights. But if you start to connect things in a way that says, okay, well, companies that are of this size and that in this particular language, then you connect the dots basically and try to basically identify those insights from the answers. That's where the value is, and this is what LFX Mentee has been helping tremendously, to be honest, and Andrea as well.
Nice. All right. Thank you, Adriana. Now, I know we touched on this a little bit, but I want to hand it back to Yursi to talk about Weaver. Because especially we already mentioned Instrumentation Score. You already mentioned the connection there. I know you're very excited. I think your big bet was right, 2026, the year of Weaver. Talk about what are some of the improvements in the Weaver project and also just in terms of adoption by the community this year.
Yeah, no, I think Weaver became a mature project this year, right? So it is a project where people started knowing what Weaver is about. People started playing with Weaver. People started writing blog posts and giving KubeCon talks about Weaver. And I think this is really the year of Weaver. It is, I think, the most promising tool that we have there in terms of measuring and fixing instrumentation quality. And enforcing, like doing the governance side of telemetry. So how do I ensure that all of my applications within my company, they have a specific attribute? I can enforce that using Weaver. I can enforce that in my pipelines. I can do live checks. But it all starts with defining the schema for that, and that comes from Weaver. While in the past years, Weaver was focusing on the internal consumption within OTel, like creating the schema so that the schemas could be used by semantic conventions to define what are the attributes and the values and so on. This year, I think, is where Weaver really took off and started being used by other people. I think it made a good progress there, and I think 2026 is going to be even better for Weaver.
Nice. Awesome. Thank you. And now let's learn a little bit. I know that this is something that I think has been in the works for a while, but Dan, I know you're excited to talk about the changes to the logging API
Yeah.
this
Well,
past year. Can you share a little bit about what went on there this year?
yeah, so it happened this year, but I think, changes are still being implemented across different languages. But yeah, I think, there was the endless discussion that seemed at times between events and logs has been settled, hopefully. And, there was, I think, thinking about logging in a different way within OpenTelemetry. And we originally said, the login API is not supposed to be a forward-facing or like a public API. Instead of have like login bridges to other like existing login frameworks. That was the idea behind login. So the login API being used as a bridge to current frameworks, and then the underlying mechanism to export them being part of the SDK. Now, when we started to think about events, and perhaps this is where like anything related to client side, all the discussions that happen on the client side, like mobile and browser, and also GenAI and LLM monitoring, basically started to show us different needs for events, right? So changes that happen to the login API now to make the login API public facing, and that login API to actually have a way to emit events. So using the login API, you can emit events. You can start to think about maybe span events in a different way, because ultimately, if you emit an event that has context in OpenTelemetry and everything has context, that's what an event should be, like tied to a particular span or a particular trace context, right? So using the login API has benefits, but also the way that we emit these events and the way that some of the improvements that have been to support complex attributes So again, this is by driven by all this stabilization of semantic conventions. We realize that, hey, we need to be able to have complex attributes and events. Because for LLM cases, you need complex attributes and or complex values and attributes. Yeah, they're basically like these changes are now in the spec and they're being implemented across. So yeah, big changes there that will unlock a lot of other different work streams, right?
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dan. Sorry. Thank you so much, Dan. And now I know we cannot move on to discussion three without talking about. I know one of the big things in 2025 is this investment in client-side usage in OTel, both client-side APIs and SDKs, both mobile and web. So I do want to hand it over, Hanson. Can you talk a little bit about some of the progress that has been made in terms of moving OTel support into the beautiful front end?
Yeah, so specifically, I mean, everything's a client, but this is end user facing clients where end users directly use that client. We talk about web, we talk about mobile. And I think there's been tremendous progress made this year in terms of maturity, in terms of stabilization, in terms of properly structuring the projects and how things are consumed. There's a new SIG for browsers, specifically tackling instrumentation and semantic conventions. On iOS or Swift, there's a push to separate the API and SDK, and allowing kind of greater modularity in consumption of those artifacts. And OTel Android is also shaving down some API edges and kind of we released or we pushed this our C candidate in OTel Android, which will probably be hopefully released sometime next year towards stability with a supported API of configuration that doesn't say, hey, configure everything. So the tools are getting to a place where they are starting to serve the community in better ways. Next thing, which we'll probably talk about in some of the next section, is well, here's the tools. How do you use that? How do you think about telemetry? How do you model all this stuff? We're not there yet there, but I do believe 2026 will be a big year for that kind of stuff.
Guess I've got a question for you, Hanson, as well, because like I watched your KubeCon presentation, The Life of a Mobile Span, which I loved. I think everyone should watch it. And it's like, like it's not the same, right? Telemetry in client side has many different requirements that are not like, if you think about the way that you design telemetry in the back end, it's got nothing to do with it, right?
Yeah, it is. I think folks stepped into the end user facing client world with kind of like a back end mentality. It's like, how do we track the stuff in the back end? Well, we'll do the same in the front end. But if you think about mobile devices as nodes in a fleet, it starts to break down, and the amount of data that's being transported, expected to safely arrive, also becomes a little bit different. So I think 2025 and 2024, frankly, was a year of taking stock and say, hey, there is a bit of a difference here. How do we start rounding things out? But yeah, the differences being recognized, diversity being celebrated and supported, is I think a key tenet of the project and some of the work that the fine folks at the end user client SIGs are doing.
Nice.
Nice. Hanson, do you walk around KubeCon and you overhear people talking about spans and you just have a lot of hold my beers? You just go like, hold my beer, hang on a second. Is that what most of your experience is?
No, it's usually just looking around, it's like, whoa, these people, cool. No beer holding during the convention. So
Oh, okay, gotcha. All
Good
right,
stuff.
cool. And so now let's move on. We've covered the ghost of OTel present, and now we are ready to visit a glimpse into the ghost of OTel future. So, what are the best things that are coming up in 2026? What are we most excited about? What is ready to take the leap into either stability or more adoption? Like, what are kind of the biggest things that we are most excited to do? And so, I want to start it off with Adriana. Adriana, tell us about OpAMP.
Ooh, OpAMP. So OpAMP is basically a protocol that was developed to manage a fleet of collectors. And the I think the things that's exciting about OpAMP is that it can make your life easier if you're running a ton of collectors in your production environment, which I would say most organizations probably are doing that. But I feel like it's kind of like the little secret of OTel, if you will, because I think a lot of like the OTel early adopters found ways around managing fleets of collectors without OpAMP. And so I would love to see in the future more organizations shift towards using OpAMP more readily. The thing with OpAMP is that it is kind of tricky to set up. It's not like, oh, let's just like click a button and straightforward and away you go with it, right? So like you got companies like BindPlane who are like, ooh, we can capitalize on that and make it easier to manage your fleets of collectors, leveraging the OpAMP protocol, and let's put a nice UI on top of it, and we can help you deal with that. So I'd say having these abstraction layers are I think we're starting to see the value of that, which when you think about it isn't a huge surprise, right? Because like Kubernetes, like you go to KubeCon, most of the companies out there that are on the solution showcase are all about Kubernetes abstractions, right? Because the stuff that Kubernetes does too complicated for the average human being to want to do from scratch. Let's just make it easier, right? So we're seeing companies sprout up that aren't just observability backends. They're like, hey, OTel does this. We can make it a little bit easier. Let's go ahead and do that. So I'm excited to see what comes out of that. To see more people adopting OpAMP, more people becoming aware of it. Maybe I don't know if this is like in the roadmap at all for OpenTelemetry, but even having like OpenTelemetry having its own little abstraction layer to make it easier to get started with OpAMP. That's what I would love to see. I would also love to see more people giving a little more love. There's like an OpAMP bridge for the OTel operator. I'm a huge fan of the OTel operator, another like little unsung hero of OpenTelemetry. I would love to see more people tapping into that functionality. So we'll see.
Yeah, that's a supervisor on the operator, right? So
Yeah,
that's very cool.
yeah.
And I think we are seeing the first crop of OpenAMP servers or OpenAMP tools. We just saw during KubeCon in Atlanta a couple of months ago. We saw the people from Nike showing how they are doing OpenAMP servers, and I thought that was really cool. Like that's an end user taking the OpenAMP spec on its own, on their own hands, and implementing a server to manage their fleet of collectors. I thought that was really cool. And I think 2026 promises also for OpenAMP. I think we're going to see a new crop of tools on top of OpenAMP.
Nice. Now, I know that a lot of work recently over the past year has gone into overall stability across the OpenTelemetry project. I know several of y'all talked about, oh, we're so happy that so many parts of it are reliable, they're more stable, there's less developer friction in, using upgrading tools. So I definitely want to talk about all the work that's gone into stability and how if you are new to OTel, there are far less potential hair pulling situations in getting started. Maybe Dan, you can talk a little bit about some of that stability work and how it'll help people using OTel in 2026.
Yeah, and I think that is one of the things that is probably I would like to sort of like call out to folks to help us guide that discussion. Is there was a blog post from the governance committee just before KubeCon, and that was also discussed at KubeCon. Is the approach to stability project wide, right? In terms of like making OTel like instrumentation stable by default, which means that and in general like components that are not marked as stable, should they be disabled by default? Should they be bundled with stable components? Or how do we handle release, the release process? Do we need some type of like epoch or releases across to have to coordinate releases across OpenTelemetry? So there are like multiple things that are being considered at the moment to be able to improve the way that people consume OTel on day two, right? I think OTel in the way that getting started is very easy, like and have been like lots of improvements in documentation, lots of improvements in SDK config, But then is that day two operations? We're like, okay, you're running at scale. What do you need as an end user? Let us know. There's a call for action there for anyone that's an end user and wants to provide a bit of feedback, direct feedback to the governance committee as well. Apart from sending them a message on Slack, that just also works.
Nice. And can you talk a little bit, Dan? I think you touched on it, but what were some of the changes and kind of helping stability moving forward? Is that what you were talking about, like enforcing that, different component versions, or can you share a little bit more about what's
Yeah,
some of the
so
stuff that's
I'll take
already.
yeah, I'll take one for example, which is the instrumentation libraries. What does it mean for an instrumentation library to be stable, right? The instrumentation library itself can be stable, it can be producing, like the code itself is stable, but maybe the semantic conventions that is based on are not stable yet. And then do you call that instrumentation library stable? I mean, do you, as a user, do you understand that you're using a stable component, but the metrics that are underneath may change with a major version bump of that instrumentation library? So these are the discussions that we want to have. So nothing's been, I guess, codified into an OTEP. So for anyone that is unaware, like OTEPs is like enhancement proposals to OpenTelemetry, and they're being discussed. Not this has not been, I guess, codified yet, but this is why we're looking for feedback from folks to understand what would work for an end user that is applying OTel at scale. Again, another thing that I mentioned was versions. So if there are many, many different components in OpenTelemetry, right? Each with their own version numbers. And I guess one of the pain points is that if you pick OTel, what is a version of OpenTelemetry, right? At some point, I think I've heard it recently, someone mentioning OTel 2.0, and I was like, I don't know what they're referring to. So is it what is OTel 2.0? So I think that's part of the reason that if you think about OpenTelemetry as a product, should there be some type of release that coordinates things at a different version of each of these components and say, okay, we'll call this that version X, right? So yeah.
Yeah, too many versioning.
Yeah,
Is
exactly.
observability and open telemetry, is it being versioned differently? Oh no, oh goodness. 2.0, 3.0. Awesome. Thank you so much, Dan. Hanson, let's talk a little bit about, so you touched a little bit about on some of the improvements in terms of open telemetry support for mobile and web. Can you talk a little bit about what's next for the Kotlin community? Because obviously Kotlin can be used everywhere, like back end, front end, but in terms of Kotlin usage in open telemetry, where do you envision that going?
First is getting people together and defining the use cases we want to support because its usage is relatively diverse, and if we want to attack it on all fronts at the same time, that could be a little chaotic. So I think we might get a problem on our hands that we have so much interest that to manage the project in a reasonable way could be difficult. But I don't know exactly where it's going to go in 2026. All I know is it's going forward. And it's going to be taken by the community to figure out what the priorities are and how we go about doing it. But I think 2026 is about forming the community and really looking at people who are previously using other technologies to achieve the same thing. On Kotlin multi-platform, for instance, you'd have to have different instances of OTel SDKs to actually, send your data back to the collector. With Kotlin SDK, you have one with multiple platforms, web, iOS, Android, and how those use cases will start evolving will really determine where it goes. But really, it's about activities, about participation. What those activities and who those participants are is TBD. But I am excited, and I am excited to be part of this. But that is just one aspect. I think a lot of work in the end user client space is going to be about documentation and getting people started and actually codifying our knowledge, perhaps in an instrumentation score, type deal implementation. But the world is our oyster. We only have so much time, and we got to figure out. We as in the community will have to figure out where it goes. So,
Man, awesome. Thanks, Hanson. And you're a C, you touched on it way earlier in the chat, but I mean, come on, we know the future is clearly AI everything. You want to talk a little bit about AI making its way into OTel?
Of course it is, right? I mean, it's not technology if it's not AI in 2026. No, I mean, I see if I look at the way that I was working at the same time last year and I compare it to where I am right now, everything changed. I don't know about you, but my entire workflow changed with the new tools, with the new AI tools. And I can only imagine that we're going to see the same kind of shift or shakeup in OTel, in instrumentation observability in general. So we've been seeing tons of AI SRE tools. We've been seeing a lot of assistants helping us build dashboards and create alerts and things like that. But I think we're not tapping into the potential. In terms of OTel, we are seeing some things already being done, like the generative AI semantic conventions. So this is one. So how do we ensure that the several SDKs that people have, or several tools that people have at their disposal nowadays, follow the same semantic conventions? Like, how do they speak the same language when it comes to observing agents, when it comes to observing generative AI LLM calls, right? So this is one aspect. The other one is there's a new proposal for OTel for an MCP server. So what does it actually mean to have an MCP server for OTel? Is it only about semantic conventions? Is it about helping people instrument their code? Is it about configuring the collector? What is it about? And I think those are all questions that we need to ask, and we're going to eventually get the answers. But also, way more than that, we talked about the instrumentation score before. We talked about how to name things and so on. I can definitely see, and this is happening already, so I can definitely see people using instrumentation score rules as a context for their coding agents, right? So that they can have better instrumentation without being OTel experts. So they can tap into our brains by using that knowledge base without having to actually know OpenTelemetry that much. We are seeing the same kind of experimentation going on our side with instrumentation agents, right? So you plug in an instrumentation agent, a coding agent into your code, and then it can suddenly configure OTel for you without knowing OTel, right? So we know that OTel is complex. We talked about the config effort that makes it easier, but that also requires so much knowledge about instrumentation, about observability, about OTel. We are trying to make it easier, but perhaps the easy button here is really like have something configured OTel for me. And I think that's one way that we can go in the future. So many directions that we can go. But yeah, I'm very excited about that specific topic for 2026 as well.
Thanks. Awesome. Thanks, Jersey. Yeah, the AI space is feeling it's moving so fast. I mean, I feel like they just announced the Agentic AI Foundation that's now part of the Linux Foundation. So I mean, my goodness, I know it's not quite CNCF, but same umbrella. We're all under the Linux Foundation. I wanted to kick it over to Adriana in terms of the future. I wanted to get your thoughts about sampling and getting a better handle on observability vendor costs. Where do you see that going in 2026?
Yes. So, um, I think, OpenTelemetry is at that point now where a lot of organizations are past that 101 phase, right? Of how do we do it? And now we're down to the are we doing it well? And, it ties into the stuff that we were talking about earlier with the instrumentation score and the other, the quality of telemetry. And the other thing, of course, is when it comes to the cost of telemetry. It's interesting to see, like we're seeing a lot of talk submissions come up around the cost of telemetry because I think a lot of organizations are waking up to a sobering reality, which is we can't emit all the telemetry we want in the world because it costs us money. So how can we emit telemetry in a way that is meaningful and yet we still save on money? And so one of the things that I think is something that we should strive to do more in 2026 is to educate more folks on how to sample effectively. It's also interesting to see that there are some observability vendors that have sampling built in on ingest to sort of help out with that, right? Because maybe people in these organizations that are consuming these products aren't necessarily well versed in sampling, right? So to have someone show them how to do it is super helpful. And there is, I'm trying to remember now the name of, oh yeah, OTel Arrow. Now, OTel Arrow doesn't do sampling, but it does deal with like, massive amounts of OTel data. And one of the things that it does is uh, the best way to describe it is it kind of it kind of compresses your data, so if you have like a bunch of repetitive stuff, you're not like sending it over and over and over, right? It just references those repetitive bits of telemetry. And so I think that's another sort of exciting area where we could see some further development, some further chatter is around OTel Arrow.
Nice. Awesome. Thanks, Adriana. And I know we had a question submitted, so I do want to go ahead and answer that as well, because I know we are coming up on the hour, but let's answer this question. So if you have any other questions, get them in now. We will see if we can squeeze them in. Are there any plans for React Native support in OpenTelemetry? Hansen, can you take a swing?
Well, React Native is funny in the sense that you write language code in one language, and it gets generated and turns into native code in other languages. So how does instrumentation and SDKs pass through that domain? Um, there isn't right now, as far as I know, React Native uh, working groups specifically about how to have first class React Native support, because you'd have to effectively, have an SDK that does JavaScript and then also have, admit, to the collectors in native platforms, and how do you tie that all together? It's certainly an interesting, there are vendor solutions out there that does React Native and OTel, but OTel itself, I think if there's a proposal and there's a community behind it, as we talked about before, we're happy to propose or accept or examine the donation proposals. But it is quite tricky. If it's hard enough to do mobile and web with one language, imagine if you have three and different running operation environments and all that stuff. So it's a very cool challenge, I'll say that. And if the question asker is interested in it, I think folks would love to talk and see what could be done. If there's a big enough community, you don't have to ask permission. You just kind of do it.
Maybe they heard earlier us talking about the dedicated browser sig, and then they said, "Oh, then JavaScript all the things immediately." I don't know. Who knows? Thank you, Hanson, so much for that answer. And that's actually. Oh, wait, hang on. We might have had one last question. Oh, okay, interesting. Hanson, this is another one for you, real quick. Maybe you give the 30-second answer. Let's see. We have a question.
Please.
It's what's the best or most effective way to get involved and ensure our use cases and interests are represented in the evolution of the OTel Kotlin observability, especially for dev teams whose primary role isn't observability?
Well, the best way to get involved is to just get informed. So there in the CNCF Slack, there's the Hotel Kotlin channel. There's also, as the SIGs and things get solidified, there'll be, additional communication out, SIGs, meetings, minutes that will come out. But right now, I would say join the CNCF Slack, search for Hotel-Kotlin, and get into it. Things are not going to be very active right now because obviously we're heading to Christmas and the holidays. But start in January, I think it's going to rev back up. You could also ping go to the repository right now, which is currently still in Embrace, pending donation, which will hopefully be moved to OpenTelemetry, the domain. You can create issues. You could message maintainers. You could reach out by email, various other ways on that GitHub page. Colin's gonna post it, I think, in part of the description afterwards. So just get involved. Just contact us.
Yep.
And making a more generic case for that, like if you are an end user and if you have any feedback to give to the community as a whole, join the OTel end user SIG. If you're not an observability expert, but you have something to say, join the community and let us know. We need feedback from end users in the whole community, not only Kotlin, but for the whole OTel community. We need you.
I would
Awesome.
also do an extra plug for the OTel and user SIG. If you have a cool OTel story to share or want to talk about how you're using OTel in your organization, reach out to either Dan or me, or even post in SIG dash OTel dash and dash user on CNCF Slack. We want to hear your story.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah, so that's all the time we have for questions. Let me just do a quick wrap up because we are coming up on time. So that's all the time we have for this awesome discussion. I want to give a big, big, big thank you to this wonderful panel. Thank you all, audience, for being here, for coming along on this journey into the past, present, and future of OpenTelemetry. Like some of the panelists have mentioned, we mentioned a lot of projects, a lot of tools. You're sitting there going, I can't remember all this. Don't worry. We will send you an email with all the links to the tools and resources our panelists mentioned today in a follow-up email so that you can have them, you can look into them, you can try them out yourselves. So, with all that said, I hope everyone here has a fantastic holiday season, an even better new year, and hopefully we will see you at the next panel. So, thank you all for being here.
Thank you.
Thanks.